Right now, Crimea is turning into a trap for the Russian army. All routes have been cut off. The Ukrainians have already landed. There is no way out. The trap has snapped shut. Crimea is coming home. A sudden covert strike was launched against Russia. Putin is losing Armenia. The Caucasus is slipping out of Russia's control. Moscow is pressuring and threatening, but Armenia has already chosen its own path. The Kremlin has lost the drone war. Even the Z community is in shock. Ukraine's latest move has shattered everything the Russians were hoping for. DRF's Shaheds are now powerless against the Ukrainian armed forces. Ukrainian innovative technologies are accomplishing the impossible. Lukashenko is preparing for war, and Belarus is urgently shifting to a war footing. A new assault on Kyiv is expected this fall. The Ukrainian armed forces are fully prepared to give their guests a fiery welcome. The trap is snapping shut on the enemy right now. All this and more in our program Hotspot. Crimea is ablaze. Ukraine's forces have cut all the occupiers' supply lines. A fuel collapse has hit the peninsula. Russia is not in panic. Putin is losing Crimea. Ukraine is ready for the final blow. Ukraine has severed the vital land corridor to Crimea.
Damn, huh? Wait, what is this? Is it all about gases, and more gases? Torn apart, eh? Last... Stop. Yes. Come on, get out. Come on. Oh, come on, just a few more vehicles, damn it. Maeva.
60,000 Russian soldiers have been left without fuel and supplies. An ammunition storage facility in Mezhgori was hit. In Jankoy, a train with fuel and military equipment caught fire. Also, the Donetsk-Mariupol highway to Crimea, one of the important rear logistics lines, has now become a road of death for the invading forces. Fuel tankers and military transport vehicles come under attack on a regular basis. The Chonhar checkpoint is now also under the control of our military. In the video, you can clearly observe how skillfully the fuel tanks traveling from Russia to Crimea along the highway were hit. Melitopol Jankoy. The Gauleiter of the occupied part of Kherson region, Saldo, has banned movement through the Chonhar checkpoint. The ban on civilian movement is, in fact, an admission by the collaborators that the Ukrainian armed forces control the land corridor with their fire. Permitting only military transport and essential goods clearly serves to highlight the scale of the problem.
And this also means that the southern grouping of the Russian Federation and the occupying forces in Crimea are being actively cut off from supplies. Believe me, right now already, some of the collaborators taking their families with them are already taking them out of Crimea. They understand where all this is heading.
Previously, Russian military convoys would hide among civilian trucks, using them as a human shield. But now everything has completely changed. An empty M14 highway means that any large transport truck is automatically considered a military target.
Again, taking into account the capabilities of our drones, considering the sophisticated technical capabilities of the unmanned aerial vehicles we have currently developed. Naval component, we fully understand that there will also be maritime support. Our drones are capable of operating, including against the port of Berdyansk itself, no matter how well it is guarded. At the very least, such strikes will be carried out from several directions today. Furthermore, this project in any case will also be connected with this overland transportation route to this corridor and to our own infrastructure.
Putin and the Kremlin insist that Ukraine's attacks on oil refineries have not affected the situation in any way. The Ministry of Energy of the Russian Federation stated that the situation on the domestic motor fuel market in Russia remains stable and under control, and there have been no recorded disruptions in supplying the regions.
In this regard, I must say, of course, we offer our sincere apologies, even though these are objective reasons. Nevertheless, to be honest with you, in this situation, I want to say that the tension will persist for a while.
But then why did the Russian Federation start restricting gasoline sales at gas stations? Just like last year, the fuel crisis began in annexed Crimea. The price of 100-octane gasoline has surpassed 100 and now costs 107 rubles. In Sevastopol, gasoline was limited to 20 liters per car, and in some places, diesel began to be distributed with coupons. Long lines are already forming at gas stations as residents fear a further shortage.
Look at this right here. What exactly is this? This is the severe shortage of fuel supplies currently in Crimea. and gas is $43.20. Diesel is 81 rubles. Damn, well, when? Where to? Why are we heading in this direction? I don't understand. There were some statements from notable and interesting figures like Solovyov, where he said, yes, independent bloggers should be jailed, but in fact, everyone who films should be jailed. We really have absolutely nothing left at all. I fully support those who make such videos and say, damn, we have a real problem. After all, we have no choice but to speak out loudly, to shout, and to show from different corners of Russia what is happening with prices here.
The head of the city appointed by Russia, Razvozhayev, stated that there are logistical difficulties, but also asked local residents to treat the situation with understanding and not to create artificial panic.
Today, a measure is being introduced that has already proven effective in order to avoid artificial panic. The overall density of fuel sales at the network will now be strictly limited. At gas stations, no more than 20 liters per car or per canister will be allowed. That is, a driver who arrives at a gas station can purchase 20 liters of fuel, either for the car or for a canister. A person who arrives at the gas station with a canister can also purchase 20 liters.
Sevastopol became the first region whose authorities introduced restrictions on fuel sales due to Ukrainian strikes on oil refineries. Before this, people in Ryazan began to complain about the lack of AI-92 and AI-95 gasoline at gas stations.
Does anyone know where you can get 95-octane gasoline today? We went to Spetsneft at Kudryavtsevo. There isn't any except for 100 octane. The attendant said that as of today, there's a moratorium. A full tank at Sportivnaya. There just isn't any. No 95. Where should I go? Is there any info?
It's no longer a country, a gas station. As a result of Ukrainian attacks over the past 2 weeks, crude oil processing has been significantly reduced or completely halted. All major oil refineries in central Russia, plants in Ryazan, Moscow, Nizhny Novgorod, Yaroslavl and Kerechi have been hit. Press to Putin, Peskov stated that the Kremlin does not see any risks with the supply of fuel to Russia after the drone attacks.
The official spokesperson for the Kremlin has openly acknowledged that in various regions of the country, fuel production may decrease, but attributed the reduction to necessary seasonal maintenance work. According to Peskov, the fuel balance has the necessary compensation system, and the Ministry of Energy is monitoring the fuel situation.
Crimea risks facing a total shortage of everything. They are not letting anyone onto the ferry crossing, and our drones are on standby along Putin's land corridor. Meanwhile, after Ukrainian strikes on oil refineries, problems with gasoline are spreading across all the occupied territories. After Crimea, restrictions on fuel sales have also been introduced in the occupied part of the Zaporizhzhia region. Gauleiter Yevgeny Belitsky announced temporary difficulties with delivering gasoline to gas stations, which is why fuel began to be sold with restrictions per person. For Putin, the land corridor became important after he realized that the Crimean bridge could be destroyed by Ukraine at any moment. But even here, he miscalculated. The Ukrainian armed forces are confidently advancing, disrupting Putin's plans and cutting off, destroying the enemy's logistics. Putin has lost. The Caucasus is slipping out of Russia's control. The Kremlin is outraged and is putting increasing pressure on Yerevan ahead of the parliamentary elections. Threats are pouring in, but the choice has been made. Armenia is setting its course toward Europe. Checkmate to the Russian world in the Caucasus. The closer the parliamentary elections in Armenia get, the more mobilized the Kremlin becomes. After his failures in Moldova and Hungary, Putin will not simply let the Armenians slip from his suffocating embrace. Following the foul-mouthed propagandists, Russian intelligence officers and provocations have joined the offensive against Pashinyan and his party.
Regarding Armenia's plans to join the European Union, this is a decision that naturally requires special and careful consideration.
After Armenia and Azerbaijan reconciled over the Nagorno-Karabakh issue, Nikol Pashinyan became openly bolder but not reckless. The Armenian government is trying to maintain a steady and friendly relationship with Russia.
Our relations with the Russian Federation have never been subject to doubt and will certainly never be questioned in the future because, as I have already stated, these ties and relations are profoundly deep and are simply not up for any form of discussion. Our relations with the Russian Federation are profoundly deep and historically significant. They are of the utmost importance to us. And in my opinion, they are evolving in a highly dynamic and multifaceted manner in the context of the emerging geopolitical realities currently unfolding within our specific region, then peace has finally been established between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Furthermore, I believe that this is having a constructive and beneficial influence on our diplomatic and strategic relations with the Russian Federation as well.
But every once in a while, statements coming out of Yerevan leave a sour taste in the Kremlin.
We will not allow the Republic of Armenia to become a province. We will not be governed the way Belarus is.
Pashinyan's own attacks, such as freezing participation in the CSTO, criticizing the Russian security model, and essentially staging a démarche by holding the Armenia-EU summit, where among the NATO guests was none other than Volodymyr Zelensky, have provoked a wave of bitter hatred from Putin's pawns.
Pashinyan is a traitor to the Armenian people and is leading Armenia to Putin. Total destruction.
I insist that this figure, no matter how many people vote for him, should never be allowed to appear in our capital again. It is difficult to imagine a greater humiliation and insult than what he inflicted on all of us on the very eve of the great holiday.
Well, Putin did not forgive Pashinyan for refusing to come to Victory Day, and on May 9th, during the dictator's press conference, the critical matter of Armenian-Russian relations was one of the first to be raised. Putin, as usual, pointedly suggested that Moscow first punishes the disobedient with the ruble and subsequently with the sword.
Now we are experiencing everything that is currently unfolding on the Ukrainian front here. But how did this all actually begin? With Ukraine's accession or attempt to join the nation of Ukraine, joining the EU.
The closer it gets to June 7th, the date of the parliamentary elections in Armenia, the more hysteria there is in the Kremlin. Analysts say that social networks are literally flooded with posts from the Russian troll factory. And sometimes Kremlin bots manage to hit the sore spots of Armenian society.
A video recently appeared featuring several unidentified individuals in balaclavas who were armed with Kalashnikov rifles, speaking in the distinctive regional Karabakh dialect of the Armenian language. They threatened to kill Pashinyan. And the vast majority of leading professional industry experts seem to believe that this video most likely also originally surfaced and emerged somewhere, somehow,
connected to the Russian special services. It is quite possible that these people are there. In reality, they have nothing to do with Armenians and even less with Karabakhis. But this is an attempt, so to speak, to escalate the situation in Armenia because all of this information refers back to the events of the past, to 2023. And this Karabakh topic is precisely hitting the sore spot. And so, of course, this video went viral on social media and sparked intense debate, the overall political discourse. People from every side of the spectrum started pointing fingers at each other.
Besides the propagandists, the Russian special services are also not idle. The publication The Insider released a major investigation in which it named who in the Russian presidential administration oversees the direction and which officers from the SVR, GRU and FSB are involved. The Kremlin sent people to Yerevan to deal with the unruly candidates. The information campaign against Pashinyan is coordinated by the recently established Presidential Directorate for Strategic Partnership and Cooperation. It is headed by Vadim Titov, a protege of the first deputy chief of the presidential administration, Sergei Kirienko. In Moscow, as always, they deny everything. Putin's drone disaster. Even the Z Patriots are already panicking. Russian Shaheds have become junk. Ukraine has seized the initiative in the skies. The Kremlin has lost the drone war. Russian attacks are falling apart in the air. Russian Shaheds are powerless against new Ukrainian technologies. All the details are coming up next. Ukraine has learned to shoot down 97% of Shaheds. These figures were presented by analysts from the Wall Street Journal. In the publication, Ukrainian air defense is directly called one of the most effective in the world. Over the past week, on average, out of more than 100 enemy UAVs launched daily, no more than a dozen reached their targets. The real test of strength came on the night of May 24th, when Russia simultaneously launched 90 missiles and 600 drones. Amidst the colossal workload, air defense managed to shoot down 549 drones.
This part is indeed very significant, but obviously, is it possible to shoot down everything at some line where we can intercept them? With a wall of layered air defense, it doesn't work out. That's why there are still not enough resources. The number today is impressive, 690 aerial attack assets. But they can't all operate at the same time. Either it's a fighter jet, Western or Soviet, or it's ground-based systems at work, CSI. That's exactly why it's an extremely difficult task to shoot down such a high number of targets, each with different speeds and flight paths, all flying to the same place at the same time.
Meanwhile, the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense is even predicting an imminent end to the Shaheds. The fact is that the few units that do reach their targets in Ukraine, often civilian ones, still don't inflict the kind of damage that those across the border are hoping for.
Even the enemy, who doesn't count the cost, understands that launching Shaheds worth $70 million at a time with a questionable success rate of about 5% is a pipe dream.
But the Russians could only dream of such a UAV destruction rate. Ukrainian drones repeatedly break through Putin's air defenses. Moreover, as it turns out, they're even capable of penetrating all three echelons of Moscow's air defense system. So the defeat in Taman, which followed in response to the attack on Kyiv, didn't really surprise anyone anymore.
Devastating strikes hit the relevant terminal, berths, and infrastructure servicing oil exports. This was reported in the summary from the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. It is clearly explained there that the standers were directly and completely destroyed. These are the specialized pipes that pump oil onto the corresponding tanker. In other words, this is a significant strike on a key logistical hub in Russia's oil export framework.
Speaking about Ukraine's capabilities, our military has repeatedly stated that they are ready to share them with partners. Naturally, on mutually beneficial terms. After all, there really is no air defense system of this level, nowhere in the world.
Today, Ukraine possesses unique experience in protecting the airspace of a large country and safeguarding critical infrastructure facilities. We are not talking about some individual systems that can be produced or purchased somewhere under contract. We are talking about a unique system that brings together many different aspects. Without creating such a system, it is simply naive today to claim that any country or its facilities are protected from modern threats that an adversary can deploy from the air. It is impossible. It is necessary to create a unique air defense system. Ukraine already has such experience.
The superiority of Ukrainian air defense is recognized even in the West, especially when it comes to countering drones. Multi-million contracts, including with countries in the Middle East, are further proof of this.
I believe that Ukraine can truly become a significant exporter of security, and this can include several key aspects. This includes the drones themselves, and in some cases, the sharing of partial information, since we must keep the golden share for ourselves. In some cases, it could involve joint assembly, and in others, the training of specialists. In other words, a comprehensive package of security exports to the locations that need it today for countries that are interested in this.
But Ukraine does not intend to stop at interceptor drones or say a particular model of air defense operations. Hundreds of new startups are already on the way. Dozens of them will become a reality. And all of this is aimed at one goal: to stay one step or even several steps ahead of the enemy.
Lukashenko is once again stirring up military rhetoric. Belarus is urgently shifting to a war footing, while the Kremlin is amassing a 100,000-strong horde at the borders. A new threat is looming over northern Ukraine. A second march on Kyiv is already being prepared for the fall. The people of the north are not greeting the occupiers with bread and salt, but with a fiery hell. A deadly trap is already snapping shut for the enemy. It will be impossible to escape from it. Russia is considering several courses of action in northern Ukraine, from creating a buffer zone in the Chernihiv region to attempting another advance toward Kyiv. According to RBC, the most realistic scenario for Ukraine, if Russia does launch an offensive, is an attempt to create a buffer zone in the Chernihiv region, with a depth of up to 10 to 20 kilometers. The least realistic scenario is a new offensive on Kyiv. For a possible operation in the north, the Kremlin may be preparing an additional mobilization of another 100,000 troops.
According to one of RBC Ukraine's internal sources, and based on one of the options chosen by the Russians, they would not be able to launch an offensive before the autumn season.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky stated that the Russian dictator Putin wants to persuade the self-proclaimed president of Belarus, Lukashenko, to participate in new Russian aggressive operations.
Is there a threat from Belarus to Ukraine? Probably there is. Especially since everyone is talking about it. It is being discussed more and more seriously at the highest level, including by the president of Ukraine. At the same time, it should be understood that it is unlikely that Lukashenko is very eager to enter this military conflict, since he probably understands perfectly well what potential threats this creates for him.
Indeed, the Batka father. Lukashenko recently stated that Minsk does not intend to get involved in the war in Ukraine. He clarified that this would only be possible in one case if Ukraine commits aggression against them.
You may have noticed I don't react to that at all. In response to all of that ongoing chatter coming out of Kyiv, which includes the recent comments from President Zelensky himself, we are simply not going to get involved in the war in Ukraine. As for his statement that Belarus will be dragged into the war, I have already stated very clearly, it will only be dragged in under one very specific and singular circumstance. If aggression is committed against our territory, and in that case, it's not about being dragged in. We also heard this from the President of Russia. We will stand together to defend our precious shared homeland, where both of our two sovereign states are situated, from Brest to Vladivostok.
A general or open mobilization in Belarus has not been declared at this time. However, targeted training activities are being conducted. The country regularly carries out scheduled conscriptions and military training for reservists. In addition, on May 21st, Putin and Lukashenko conducted the second stage of joint nuclear force exercises. This demonstrates Russia's increasing control over Belarus. Russia now has more opportunities to use Belarusian territory for its military operations. Although for Lukashenko, getting involved in the war against Ukraine is not advantageous.
It seemed like life was just starting to get better for Lukashenko. The United States is lifting sanctions, so it seems like everything should be going well, and now to get dragged into some kind of war, well, that's probably the last thing he needs. But at the same time, he is obviously forced to do so. He somehow has to respond to the constant pressure from Putin, which is clearly only increasing. In other words, Putin clearly needs it as soon as possible. A victory in Donbas. For that, it's necessary to stretch out the Ukrainian forces. To do this, they need to create a threat against Kyiv and Chernihiv. Therefore, the pressure on Lukashenko in this regard is probably quite serious.
I see. As usual, and as has become tradition, Lukashenko will maneuver.
Apparently, right now he is forced to maneuver. On the one hand, he is consistently and publicly portraying a readiness to support Putin. Through his frequent public statements, he keeps declaring that he is ready. Ready, that he will literally always help, support, and do absolutely everything in his power. But in reality, Lukashenko most likely wants nothing less than to actually get involved in this war. That's why it is my firm belief that the statement from the Ukrainian authorities is, first and foremost, a warning to Lukashenko that no matter how much Putin threatens him, if he directly enters this war, the consequences for him will be absolutely and incredibly severe, worse than anything Putin has promised him.
Experts also believe the Belarusian army lacks the experience, strength, and capabilities of the Ukrainian military.
It is entirely uncertain how the Belarusian army would actually behave against the Ukrainian army, which has already gained considerable experience in confronting a much more serious, formidable, and dangerous enemy. In addition, Ukraine has recently significantly strengthened its capabilities in terms of long-range strategic strikes, particularly with sophisticated drones, are proving effective. Ukraine is now successfully striking oil refineries deep within Russian territory. That is, SBU strikes are reaching as far as Perm, Tuapse, the Urals, and even the distant Leningrad region, significantly impacting their infrastructure.
Currently, according to RBC, activity in the Chernihiv-Kyiv direction and the level of threat are low. However, the military and political leadership is monitoring several factors, events, and signs that may indicate the Russians are preparing for possible offensive actions in the north. First and foremost, this concerns the number of troops near our northern borders. On the Belarusian side, as before, there are 4 battalions of the Belarusian army stationed. This is about 1,900 military personnel who are constantly being rotated. There are not enough Russian troops to conduct offensive operations either from Belarus or from the Bryansk region. Be that as it may, Ukraine is not letting its guard down. According to President Zelensky, all components of the defense forces are working to strengthen protection in the Chernihiv-Kyiv direction. And through diplomatic channels, the relevant data will be passed on to partners and signals will be sent to Belarus.
across every one of these specific regions, we will guarantee that the local population feels confident and secure that Ukraine is protected, that the armed forces are firmly in place, the necessary weapons are readily available, and the appropriate personnel are present in the required numbers. And even if the opposing enemy forces are considering their various potential strategic moves, when they witness the massive forces gathered here, I think their desire to attack will surely fade away.
Russia's collapse has begun. Ethnic and migrant conflicts have reached a new level. Moscow's imperial psychosis grows. Russia has exploded from within. A bloody massacre is taking place in the streets. The Russian world is spinning out of control. Threats, hatred, and hysteria towards migrants. The Kremlin is launching a conveyor belt of coercion and violence. We have the details in this report. The collapse of Russia is already near.
To respond to the challenge of the times, what must Russia be? Strong. We keep talking about this with you face to face all of the time now.
But these conversations will no longer lead to anything. Putin is losing power and trust. A coup in Moscow is inevitable. The conflict between locals and migrants in Russia is escalating.
I am a Russian doctor and I'm seeing patients.
I am a male doctor. If you agree with this, you can transfer and find yourself a Russian district doctor, however you wish to proceed.
Yes, of course, certainly. I'm Chechen, and you are all sorts of people.
I understand everything. Stop.
Like at a military factory or something? And how do you feel?
My feelings on Russians?
Russians, so soon?
But how? I like Russian people.
That you worked with Russians. All Russians, crunch.
Well, if you want it that way, you can accept this question. Why can't I work where I want? And what?
Don't you want to live in Chechnya?
Social networks are overflowing with news about clashes, and Russians are increasingly expressing their dissatisfaction with the current situation in the country.
Viktor Anton is taking away a Russian citizen's job.
The Kremlin's anti-migration policy is only getting stronger, and it is precisely people from Central Asia who have come under the greatest pressure.
Where did you come to? Where are you staying? Did you actually come here just to work? Did you really come here to work? Work, and please don't open up, okay? You're a slave of Russians in Uzbekistan. You couldn't find anything at home, so you came here. Did I say something wrong to you? There's nothing in Uzbekistan, so you came here.
Non-Russians must now leave.
My fellow citizens of this great nation.
Allowed.
Stay. You Russian?
The incitement of xenophobia is happening against the backdrop of a severe labor shortage in Russia. About 83% of Russian companies report a shortage of personnel. The fall of the ruble, everyday life, racism, and strict inspections have led to a 10% decrease in the number of migrants in recent years. As a result, a vicious cycle persists in society. Russian businesses are demanding the return of workers to sustain the economy. Meanwhile, the local population and law enforcement are calling for further expulsion of foreigners.
First of all, many people in Russia often mistakenly categorize migrants alongside their own fellow citizens who happen to have a distinct skin tone or a different eye shape. Very often, they simply do not realize that, for example, a lifelong resident of the Republic of Buryatia or Tuva is also a Russian citizen. And that is not even mentioning the many residents of the republics of the North Caucasus whom, for some strange reason, some Russians continue to consider as being foreigners.
Russia is tightening its migration policy. The State Duma is passing a law that allows law enforcement to deport migrants without a court decision. And Russian officials at various levels are constantly talking about the harm caused by illegal immigrants.
The government of the state is waging a war. And in order to wage war, they need ordinary citizens to hate someone else. And not the people at the very top of the government who in fact started this war. So yes, they try to redirect this hatred sometimes toward Ukrainians, sometimes toward migrants, well, toward whoever is convenient.
Redirect the hatred and impose obligations. Russia is intensifying the forced recruitment of migrants into the army. But the patience of migrants may eventually run out. Earlier, Ruslan Kutayev, a Chechen public figure, had already warned the Russian government about a coup in Moscow.
When the moment finally arrives to take action in Russia, we will act. And only with our formal approval will the governing authority that rules Russia be established. Only with us, because Russia has its own deeply rooted historical traditions. Whoever takes the capital effectively controls the entire nation. and absolutely no one will be able to govern the capital, and no one will come to power without first coordinating directly with our group. And we can say this quite boldly because we have very solid and undeniable grounds for making it.
Although the information space is overflowing with rumors about an imminent change of power, there are currently no real signs of an immediate coup in Russia. However, one should not ignore the critical mass of negative factors: prolonged military miscalculations, systemic corruption, and economic decline. It is precisely these factors, together with a hidden split among the elites, that form a solid foundation for the upcoming political destabilization.
But when this will happen is extremely difficult to say. I would personally associate this possible, escalation, certain internal escalation of these complex political processes directly with Putin's eventual death or with some kind of major operations, such as his sudden overthrow, various palace coups, or the rise of new successors. The more of all this there is, the more indeed the southern peoples, they will surely start to find their voices and raise their heads.
A crisis in Russia could erupt at any moment, and will Putin be able to hold on to power then? The question remains open. That's all for now. Watch more breaking news in the next episode.